let's get into our game review. We're gonna have a lot to talk about here. Today we are reviewing Anno 1800. This is from designer Martin Wallace. There is no listed artist here because the artists are the same artists that are credited in the video game, because all of the art comes directly from the video game, of which I think there is a lot of people who are involved in the art on that. The publisher is Cosmos Games. It plays 2 to 4 players. BGG says a time of about 75 to 120 minutes, which isn't too far off. It's a 2 to 3 hour game, I think. And it puts it at a weight of 3.34. Before we get into the review, how do you guys feel about that weight, and how do you feel about the game time?
The beauty of the game is that it's as long as the players want it to be.
That is true. Although I think there would be a minimum, right? I mean, like, I think there'd still be the fastest anyone could ever dump their hand. It would be hard to do it in 90 minutes. I feel like maybe.
I don't know, because I no longer have people like Paul to push the limits, right?
That's right. He is a game rusher. Eric, what do you feel about the weight? What would you put this at?
I'd say that's about right. It's like medium weight, but I guess it's a bit deceptive, where it's definitely not a hard. It doesn't feel like a very complex game. Like, the rules are pretty simple.
Right.
There's not like a lot of little rules that you kind of got to remember. It's pretty straightforward. But I guess the complexity comes in the contextual parts of the game, like, paying attention to, what other people are doing, the trading, the meta. Like, there's an interesting conversation around the table where it's like, do you trade with somebody who has gold, and their game isn't going to be affected at all? Like, do you always give gold to the person who has 0 gold, or do you?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Do you try to start?
There's some king making there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jennifer, do you want to just give us the high level pitch? If I bumped into you at a convention and I said, "Why should I play Anno 1800?" How would you pitch it to me?
Because the video game is the best in the world. No, I'm kidding.
You do love the video game. We know that.
No, I would pitch it because I feel it is innovative. I feel it has how can I say? It has improved race mechanics, but it's not necessarily a race.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, when I teach the game, I say, think of this as the Indy 500. It's not how fast you go. It's how many times you have to stop for a pit stop. That's what's going to decide the game.
Really?
Well,
I think so.
Well, but also, I'm not sure about that. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but it's also interesting that you can win the race and lose the game.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's not the only thing. I think typically if you win the race, you're going to win, just because other people,
especially when you're new,
Yeah. And again, it is one of those great games that really, it depends, on who you're playing with, and the meta that the game changes quite dramatically, I think. Depending on
let's try to break it down a little bit for people who may have no idea anything about this game. So
okay, I can do better.
Please. Yeah. Well, yeah. Tell us the theme too, of people who've never even played the board game or the video game.
You are so funny. Okay. Basically, guys, or folks, the game is set in 1800. The theme of the game is to create stuff, right? And so you're trying to make canned goods, or you're trying to make soap, or you're trying to to expand your borders from your start. Okay. And then as the game goes on, you may move on to the new world, just as the Europeans did. It's definitely a game that's based in 1800 Europe, but at the same time, you know, you may have some concerns about the game going to the new world. It's not exploitive. You, as a player, treat the new world people the same way that you treat the Europeans. They are not slaves. So you have different sets of people who will provide your work, your resources. You have farmers who farm, workers who do basic um, workers who do basic resource production from the farming resources.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the English rules call them um, craftsmen, but they're actually called artisans. So you have,
Artisans, yeah.
yeah, artisans. So you have, the artisan class, which makes, luxury style things for the rest of the people. And then you have engineers who, we're getting into 1850, 1860 later on as the steam engines and other things are invented. And then you have investors, which of course come back to the early days of railroads, right?
Right.
And so,
And these are all just different colored cubes, right?
yeah, but they all have a lot of meaning because you're not going to start with investors. So the game takes you along the timeline of European history from 1800 to probably, I'd say 1870
Mm-hmm.
is when investors became a thing. So they aren't all equal, right? And they all can't, they can only do the things that they are assigned to do. So if you have an artisan, and you have no more farmers, but you have artisans, the artisans will not do farmer work. They only do
Mm-hmm.
artisan. So, there is that. You start with a pretty large hand of cards. You start with 9 cards. It's 9 cards. 7 of the cards are fairly easy to do, and 2 of the cards are pretty hard to do.
And they're kind
Okay.
of like contracts, right?
Yeah, kind of, right, right. The main thing is that the 2 hardest ones are the ones that stop you from just ending the game in 20 minutes because you aren't fulfilling those last 2 in 20 minutes, right? And you really don't have a way to get rid of them. Yes, you can bury them under the same pile they came from, but that's not really going to necessarily help. So,
And what ends the game?
the game is over when a player runs out of cards. Okay. The other thing about the game is that it has in-game objectives that are variable. Okay. So, in one game, maybe the new world gives you 6 points and other little things give you points. But in a different game, you can have a mission card that everyone, like when the game is over, you lose points for having cards in your hand. We haven't tried that one yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
I
That
have. I love that card.
Right. That should be super exciting.
Everybody
Um,
must race.
right, right, exactly. And then, there's also a card that says you can okay, that if you only expand one time, you get 18 points. Well, 18 points is the
Yeah.
biggest single amount of points on the cards. But only expanding once it's going to take some strategy and some planning and maybe a little luck as well.
That's a fantastic explanation of the game. Eric, can you tell us how this isn't just multiplayer solitaire? What is the interactivity in this game?
Yeah, I think the interactivity is pretty ingenious in that, like, and this is one of the things that is not obvious, I think, when you first start playing. But there's a uh, a tech tree that gets developed as you're going through these stages, as Jennifer said, in time of development. You're really developing this island or the civilization, um, and you're starting with very basic goods that are. And I mean, I think that you know, thematically, I think the game is brilliant. I mean, of course, it's Martin Wallace, and then it's based on this great video game, which I'm actually kind of intrigued to play now. Um, but the goods that you develop are very essential to kind of like the needs of the people, right? Your workers that you're developing. Um, uh, but you cannot make everything. You can't produce all the goods, and so there's this really ingenious, it's very simple, but a pretty ingenious, I think, trading mechanic where you get these trade tokens. You start with a few trade tokens that are tied to merchant ships, which you could acquire more of during the game, by building ports and spending actions to build more ships. And that's a little efficiency game and timing game in itself when you buy your ships and if you buy exploration versus trading. But and also you can get temporary trade tokens from cards, but ultimately you use these trade tokens to use goods that other players are making that you need to fulfill your population cards or your uh, um, contract cards, if you will. And you cannot trade more than one thing on your turn, right? So like if I like cannons are like a big I love that there's like certain things like cannons, glass, brass, like there's these kind of key things that once they get built, it really accelerates the pace of the game.
But you can't trade the same thing more than once, right?
Exactly.
But
So
you
like,
actually don't have to have anything. You could fulfill a contract purely just trading with other
yeah,
people.
just on
Right.
trading,
Yeah.
which I think
It's
is
awesome.
brilliant, right? Yeah, and like a really cool thing that happens is sometimes again other players will first of all they'll build something that takes them a lot of resources and times to build, and then you can just take advantage of it by trading. You don't have to build it yourself, which saves you tempo, right? Um, and then they do get a reward. They get 1 gold, which allows them to do a couple things in the game. Allows them to kind of refresh workers, and there's another thing that gold is used for. I can't remember right now. Um,
Well, some mission cards use it, but that I think
yeah,
it's only used for pulling back your workers, other than if there's a special mission card they're out.
right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
but the only I would like to interject and say
sure,
to get your workers back normally, you have to take an entire turn. The
right.
goal lets you get back individual workers so you don't have to lose that turn. So it's very important.
Right, and very valuable. And so I've had certain games where, like, I might build something that, I'm interested in building, but I'm also thinking in the back of my mind too, well, if I build this, then everybody's going to want to use it. So I'm going to be getting a lot of gold, which is going to be valuable.
Yeah. That's the question of the game, isn't it? Right? That you take a
Right.
whole turn to build the gramophone, but then 4 people score 8 points off of it, and all you got was 4 gold.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Is
I
that worth it?
Yeah.
mm, I
And,
don't
and
think
then,
you can evaluate it like that though. But go ahead. I'm interrupting.
No,
well,
no, no. Yeah, yeah. Sorry,
no,
go ahead.
well, I want to hear what you have to say on that, Jennifer, but also like there's certain things like there's a decision to make where like I have more advanced cards like the 5 or the 8 cards,
Right.
and I need a certain thing, like let's say I need automobiles, right? And now am I gonna spend the time and invest in building those myself, or am I gonna wait and see if somebody else is going to build it so I can build up my trade capacity so I can just trade with them. And
Right.
that's a really important decision to make in the game, and you can get stuck. Like I know in my last game, there was like 3 or 4 things that nobody else seemed to be interested in building that I needed to complete the game, and it was just going to be too much for me to do on my own, and it really, it affected my in game result.
So yeah, Jennifer, I'd love to hear what you had to say about the balance of gold and trade tokens.
But I think that, trade tokens are expensive, right?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. You
Yeah.
have to build a whole
So,
ship.
pardon?
You have to build a whole ship to get them.
Right, exactly. And that's the only way. The city festival is the only way to get them back, right? You can't use gold. So even though it feels like, the feeling is, well, gee, I'm going to take this one or maybe two tokens, and instead of, having to spend 4 tokens or 4 resources to build this thing, right? But I feel you really need to seriously evaluate your position. Is that my last trade token,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, if that's my last trade token, and Eric over there has a bunch of gold, and I'm over here doing city festivals to get more trade tokens, where is the tempo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
And
that's
right. And also, like, do I have cards in my hand that will provide me with temporary trade tokens?
Those temporary trade tokens can be super powerful too, because people
Yeah.
cannot expect you to all of a sudden go from 0 to 4 trade tokens in one turn.
Right.
right. Those are really good, except again, if you do a city festival and they're still there, you lose them, right?
Right. Yeah. So
So,
timing is crucial.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And see,
Right.
that's what makes the game so good is that all of these decisions matter,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And
And
even though it seems like at first, oh, it's just another engine builder game. And you're like, nope, it's not just another engine building game. If
yeah.
you play it like that, I will beat you every time.
Yeah.
And that
And
yeah,
one
go
one
ahead.
other thing I want to mention about this too. So another thing to consider on this is that advanced good, like that those automobiles or gramophone, is there a mission card that rewards you for that? You
Right,
know, or
right,
is there a mission card that rewards having the most trade tokens at the end of the game? So
right.
you're factoring whether those mission cards are in the game or not as an objective.
And that
Right.
is my favorite part of this whole game is those, because there are no hard and fast strategy rules in this game. I
Right.
mean, other than maybe on your first turn you want to get the blue coal. Other than that, there's nothing I can tell you that will apply to every game, because these 5 mission cards that come out make it a different game every time, and the combination of them, you're never going to have the same game twice, and that is, to me, I really loved this game. But then when I really started looking at all the mission cards and understanding how drastically they changed the game, that's when I sort of fell in love with it and could see myself still wanting to explore this game in, years from now.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Yeah, yeah. It,
Um, I, Jennifer, as the designer of Advanced Civilization, do you consider this a civilization game?
um, it okay. So it's a technology game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the technology moves along in the game. Like I said, by the time you get to investors, the kind of things that you're making are way more complex than the things that you started with. So if you look at civilization, advancing through technology, then yeah. But I wouldn't try to sell this game as a Civ game. Well, very few people that I play with now have ever played Advanced Civ. So, if I talk like you could call it like Tapestry Civ game.
Right.
I think it's closer to that than it would be to Advanced Civ.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. This is a not a hard game to learn. Um, it's actually, I would, in terms of the teach, it's not that bad. Now, it looks wildly overwhelming at the beginning. There are 32 resources in this game, not including, oh no, 35 resources in this game, not including docks and boats. And it's a lot. And like the first time I played it, it feels utterly chaotic. Other than just like, okay, look at I mean, your cards guide you. You look at your cards and you go, well, I have 3 cards that need bread, so well, I guess I should build bread now. And then you start looking at your 8-point cards and go, well, okay, so a couple of these I have, maybe I'll start looking at light bulbs, but okay, I need to get an investor for that, and I'm going to need brass, and okay, to get brass, I'm going to need this, and so you start sort of backwards reverse engineering this tech tree that you need to create in order to get there. And then of course you don't have to do all of it on your own, because maybe some people will accidentally build things that you need along the way. But learning this game was easy. Like it's pretty simple. On your turn, you can do, there's like 8 different things you can do, but they're all very simple. To me, we'll discuss this in a little bit. Remind me to bring this up again, but I do want to talk about if this game is micro turns or not. But at first, it definitely felt like micro turns to me, because you
Right.
do one little thing, you build one industry, or
Right.
you upgrade a couple cubes, or you dump a couple cards and pick up some new ones, or you go to the new world. Your turns are pretty fast unless you have AP. There's nothing in there's no massive combos until the end of the game if you have some extra actions waiting around for the end game trigger or whatnot. But the teaching the game is pretty simple. You have a couple things you can do in your turn, but knowing why you should do any of those things takes time. And also, there's a certain amount of memorization that's necessary, of just memorizing what leads to what and what's necessary. Like at the beginning of the game, you have potatoes as an industry on your board. Potatoes build one thing: schnapps. That's it. So once you build schnapps, you can cover up your potatoes. You'll literally never need them again. And you wouldn't know that your first time playing, because you don't know. Maybe there's some cards that need schnapps, or dynamite is something that you can build, and it's used for one thing, which is to make the giant artillery guns. And so once you build your giant artillery guns, you can get rid of your dynamite. And so there's a lot of it is just like memorizing this tree. And then somebody's put this great document together that lists how many times every good in the game appears on these contract cards, so that sort of the value of goods. Like bread is on 10 of the early cards, so it's good to have bread. And the shirts industry is on 10 cards as well. But some of the higher ones, like light bulbs, those are on 4 cards out of a deck of 30 something cards. So your odds of getting more than one of those are pretty low. And all that stuff to me is where this becomes a heavy game. This is not a game I feel like I could teach this game to anybody, but I wouldn't want to play this game with anybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think this is a game that doesn't have a great first game, which is funny. I think a lot of my favorite games are like that. Like, they do not have a good first game. You will not have a good feeling as a player at the end of your first game of this.
Right.
But I think the mechanics are exciting enough to make you want to come back. At least they were for me. And by my second or third game, my brain was on fire with this. So yeah, let's move into sort of our overall thoughts about it. Jennifer, you want to start with us? What things you like about it? Think maybe some reservations, things like that.
Well, the biggest thing, which this has been a recurring issue, is the swinginess of the cards, right? And so sometimes it feels like, and again, I haven't played it enough to say for sure, but it just feels like there are certain combos that fall into your hands. And then sometimes, no matter what you do, you can't get, anything that's at all reasonable, or that it all goes together. Like one game, I had 3 cards that needed the pocket watch, right? And that's really cool, because
Yeah,
now,
you lucked out.
right, exactly. And so when you're at the table with me and I quote lucked out, you're like, wait a minute, right? So, I think the swinginess of the cards is going to be the negative. The positive, as I was saying, is that combining the rush with the engine build without making the engine build the rush, if you
Mm.
understand what I'm saying, is really innovative. And, it just gives me, such happiness to see Martin Wallace come back to some innovative, interesting designs, because back in the day, that's all we expected of him. Age of Steam and Brass and even Automobile was innovative. And then some of the later stuff was either too light, you know, or really strange, like ships, So
Yeah,
it's
that was
been
the big like sort of holy crap moment of when you taught the game to me was I think I asked you a couple times. I'm like, wait, what ends the game? And you're like, you got to get rid of all your cards. And I'm like, yeah, but most of my cards when I play them, they draw more cards. And you're like, yeah, figure it out. That's the game. And I was like,
right,
mind blown. Like, what are you?
right.
But when I play cards, it draws me more cards, but I have to get rid of all my cards. How do you're like, yeah, that's
No,
the game.
no, yeah, but you don't have to get rid of all your cards.
You
You
that's
just have
exact.
to have more points when someone else gets rid of all of their cards.
Right.
But you don't know how easy it is for them to get rid of their cards. They can bluff you to death with two
Mhm.
cards that they may never be able to fulfill. But you don't know. You've got 15 cards and they have two, and you're like, oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? Right? It's such a Paul game. That's the other thing that I like about it.
Yeah, gotta
It's
play
so
this with
Paul.
Paul. Yeah. It's funny, it even says in the rules, there's a little passage where it's, I mean, I think it's like on the strategy tips page or whatever, but it says something like, you may be thinking, like, how the heck am I going to get rid of all the cards? But you will eventually, right? Like, it's so great. It's so
and
good.
and it definitely is one of those things where I think when you're learning this game, if a bunch of new players sit around and play, the person who empties their hand first is going to win.
Right.
And that's the obvious early strategy, right? You get 7 points as a bonus just for emptying your hand. It triggers the end of the game. Most likely, if you've emptied your hand, you've probably played more cards than other players if you're playing against inexperienced players. But I would love to hear from both of you, Eric, before we get to your final thoughts on it. What do you think it takes to be successful at this game that's not rushing? What do you think goes into that kind of a victory, a non-rushing victory?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is being the most effective at trading,
Right.
right? Of like not, I mean, I think that's um, an early player mistake is to try to build everything that you need and really not paying attention. Like I think that's one of the beauties of the game is when somebody builds something, like somebody builds glass all of a sudden, or somebody builds windows or fur coats, and it's like, oh, I don't have to build it now. You know what I mean? Like it's just like something just opens up as soon as somebody builds something, right? And also you got to be really careful yourself that you don't build one of those key products or industries before you're ready to take advantage of it at least as much as the other players, because you could be building unknowingly building somebody else's path to victory for them.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah. So things like that, I've been thinking about them a lot. Like, and I find myself like having shower thoughts about this game all the time of like, is it always a mistake to be the first player to build windows or coats? You know, like everybody wants windows and coats to exist in the game. You need windows to create purples to turn your reds into purples, and you need coats to turn your purples into light blues. And everybody wants them.
I
So
think,
it's
yeah, I don't think it's always a mistake, but I think
yeah.
you need to be able to take advantage of the gold that you can expect.
Hmm.
That's a good point. Yeah, because you have to think of it as yes, I'm building this first, and it will definitely help a lot of people. But you know what? It's gonna prevent me from having to take a whole turn off resetting next round, and I will be able to leverage that into something positive.
Right.
And there's also, something that like might not be so popular, right? But there is, there's no rule that says you can't table talk. And I have
Sure.
been in games where people were like, "Hey, if I built a fur coat, are you going to build this?"
Mm-hmm.
Like those
Mm-hmm.
deals can get me, and it's very thematic.
And in some, and again, those mission cards, I always come back to that. They change everything because in some games, having chocolate and rum is worth 6 points each, and so it's like,
Right.
who cares if it's on your contract cards? Like, there's only 2 of them. I'm going to get it.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that changes everything. And then you're racing to get these things that you don't even care if you really need because you got to deny everybody else getting them.
Yeah, I've been in games where Eli's in the game with the
Oh,
where you get the points for all the basic goods and they're all on there, and it's
Right.
like it's crazy, like the feeding for like in a 4-player game, the feeding frenzy for those things, like they're gone at like the first couple rounds. You're like,
we
holy
had that
mackerel,
yesterday, and
everything's
I think
gone.
I got what 6 out of 7 of his goods,
Out
I
of
think, and
7.
I was
Yeah,
so happy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I was like 18-point card, I did it. And then like, yeah, it was and then I got but it also like then I got a ton of gold because everybody, needed that stuff for those early cards. It's
Yep.
interesting. So yeah, Eric, we all love this game. Tell us why this game works for you and what you love about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything in addition to what I mean. I think we covered a lot of the great points that I wanted to mention. It's just like it's a very interesting Wallace design. Not really what I expected. It's just one of those games that I feel. I mean, I've played it a bunch now. I would say it's definitely my most played game recently. Binge game. It might be. It's definitely up there for one of the most played games, like new games that came out this year, that I've played this year, and I can still say like, whereas some of the other games that I've played, where I played a lot of, I kind of got got a little burnt out on them, as my binging often does, right? Like I'll just burn out on a game. But this is one of those games where it's like, yeah, I might be a little burnt out on it, but even at this stage, it's still fun every time I play it. Which is like, man, that's a lot of ammunition for it being, possibly my top new game this year.
Yeah, and Trey said something during a game yesterday that was really telling. He was like, I'm not sure if I like all these cards yet, but I just finished a game and I want to immediately play again.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
And that's a pretty good sign. Jennifer, you've played the video game a lot. I'm just curious because I've only played the tutorial in the video game, and Eric said he hasn't played it at all. And I actually heard that Martin Wallace designed this game without ever playing the video game.
Wow.
How does this compare to the video game in terms of like, does it feel like the video game at all?
Well, I would say no, because the video game, just like, one thing I do want to mention, some people are surprised that Cosmos is doing this game because it doesn't seem to fit with them, but they did the other 2 Anno games. So that's why they're doing this one. But yeah, the video game is more about building cities,
Mm.
and you build all of these people and then you put them to work, and then you hope that there's not more work than there is people, because then everybody starts rioting and you've got to fix all the riots. And in the video game, there's pirates who basically you're trying to trade stuff between islands. You know how we go to the old world with the additional tiles, or to the new world. When the video game, there's pirates along those routes, so you have to kind of protect your trade ships. And the video game can last forever. There really isn't. I mean, you can do a victory condition if you want, but if you don't want to, that's fine too. Um, there's a lot more NPCs in the. Okay, NPC is non-player character. I'm sorry, it's a very common acronym in the video game world, and the NPCs add so much flavor to the video game. There are black characters in the video game that fit. Like one of the pirates Haitian that got thrown out of Haiti. So he started pirating. And one of the NPCs that you play against, she's a woman whose husband died in debt prison, and so she had to go out and make her own fortune, kind of thing. I mean, very believable, very thematic.
Yeah, and
There, go
it's
ahead.
very interesting. Like again, you mentioned that all the art comes from the video game, right? And
Yeah.
I also think it's very interesting that Martin Wallace didn't play, and maybe whoever you can speculate on the reasons why on that, but it's an interesting footnote.
Well,
Um,
no, but that I think is a good thing. You wouldn't
yeah,
want what is not in the board game from the video game. You don't want that in the board game.
yeah, that's kind of what I suspect, right, from that, which is just a fascinating. Like I'm just very much a fan of adaptions, and I'm very kind of fascinated by using source material to adapt to some other format. So I think it's just all very, very rich and fascinating in that, like, you got this great video game, and now we got this really great board game, which is an abstraction of that, which takes elements, right? And I love the element of the brown people that are on the cards. It's just these portraits, but the you mentioned the NPCs, Jennifer, and you can see that, like, in the
Right,
art, like
right,
these are very just beautifully rendered portraits that have a lot of character. That the hairstyles, the clothing,
right.
like it's just it's just an interesting design detail, but it really does add to the flavor of the game.
Yeah, yeah, and it the way both the board game and the video game, I think, brings diversity into gaming in a way that we haven't seen. You know, we do get the like Tekkenu or Teotihuacan, but those are all within one culture, right? And this, crosses cultures. We're going from Europe to the Caribbean, right? And that's very different.
Yeah,
Most times,
it's really nice to finally be playing a game set in Europe in the 1800s and not having to, make major moral transgressions in order to feel good enjoying it.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I mean is, is Teotihuacan is located in one location, right? And so you're like, okay, well, I'm playing as indigenous people, and that feels great, better than the usual. But I don't know of any other games that both cross from Europe to the New World and don't raise Europe above the New World.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, this one does not seem to cast an eye of judgment on anything. Yeah, it's sort of
Yeah.
unobjective. Yeah. Jennifer, you've played the video game a lot. There are a million expansions for the video game. I'm the game enthusiast. I instantly love a game and want expansions. Is there anything that jumps out to you that you've seen in the video game that you're like, oh, they have to do this for the board game?
Well, see, that was the thing, and no one got it. But in my first Anno video, I was wearing a lion T-shirt, and the
Are
last
we poachers?
no, the last expansion for Anno on the video game is Land of Lions in Bassa, right?
Mhm.
I
Interesting.
wonder where in Bassa is,
Mhm.
right?
Hmm.
So
What are the new mechanics that come with that?
you know what? It's a story campaign that I haven't
Got it.
finished. Yeah,
Right.
it's a story, but there are new NPCs. There's a whole new class called scholars, and which makes the research much easier. But I just haven't gotten that far because I'm always restarting in those kind of games.
Right.
So
Of course.
yeah, so there's okay. If you were gonna buy the expansions piecemeal, I would skip the Arctic. That's about the only one that really wasn't. it was okay, but
Got
you
it.
know in Bossa the storyline's really good, and the scholars are good. All the others you can read them. I don't know how much, like, one of the great things about this Anno is that they brought in a lot of city beautification. Like there is a expansion that lets you add carnival rides, right? So,
Hmm.
if you don't care about carnival rides, you probably shouldn't buy it. But if you want your cities to look really cool, and because Anno has a day night cycle. So at night, the Ferris wheel and the roller coasters, you can add that.
Sure, sure. Got it. Well, we all. I think you're going to see this game on a lot of our end of year lists. And if you are salivating over it after hearing us talk about it, you can pre-order it. I believe the American version. We Jennifer and I imported this from France through Philibert.net, but you can, or no, you got it through Amazon, didn't you?
Yeah, Amazon.de, but it's
Yeah.
now €90 there, which is insane.
Right.
So
Well, the American version of it is, or the American version, the English version of it is coming out early in January. I've been told you should be able to get it at the beginning of the year. It's almost entirely language independent. So if you really wanted to find a non-English version or a German version, there's like 4 cards in the whole game that aren't in English, and you only need them during the setup. So yeah, there's
yeah, the other thing is the English rules aren't posted. Someone has done a translation, and it's on Board Game Geek in the rules forum.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So yeah, you can check it out there. It's also on. There's a public mod for it on Tabletop Simulator. You can check it out there. That's where we've all been playing it together, of course. Um, and yeah, that's it. Anno 1800. Wow, it came out of nowhere, honestly, and totally blew me away this year. Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.